All right, well, so we're going to wrap things up with the research roundup. David Van Tassel.
Thank you, and it's kind of intimidating to go after all these excellent talks. But I'll take some courage, and if you see me touching this podium, it's because for some reason, there's a picture of Stan here with a really vigorous sorghum plant and with huge rhizomes, and so I'll draw some strength from our senior plant breeder and the amazing vigorous sorghum plant. So. Well, there have been many years that I've dreaded this moment, thinking, what am I supposed to say that's new? We do the same cycle of planting and harvesting every year. There's nothing new under the plant breeding sun. But this is not one of those years. For the past 2 years, I have focused almost exclusively on Silphium, putting my long-term Maximilian sunflower program on the back burner. Silphium is a native genus in the sunflower family that attracted my attention about 15 years ago. Walking past the ghosts of old plots of this and other native plants that Wes and others planted in the early 1980s, I noticed that Silphium plants produce seeds about 10 times larger than those of other perennial sunflowers. A professor from Texas, Jim Manhard, was visiting and told me that when all the crops and other plants burn up in a Texas drought, the Silphiums along the road are the only ones that remain green. That's almost the only green in the landscape. So he and I began collecting seeds and growing larger populations. I began selecting for more seeds per head. All of this was a side project until about 2011 and 12, when Maximilian sunflower and other crops did very poorly due to drought. Silphium plants in the field looked fine. So it appeared that there was some truth to these observations from Texas, and I then found similar reports from Nebraska that were made during the Dust Bowl years. So getting back to some things that Lee was talking about when we think about domestication, one thing is it appeared that Silphium, compared with other wild plants, sort of has a head start. It has some natural advantages. It's got a little head start on the domestication pathway, and those include things like large seeds. It already has these large seeds with high oil content. They taste very similar to sunflower, annual sunflower, so they're familiar tasting. It has upright stems, early flowering, and the seed is slow to shatter. It's not completely non-shattering, but slower than many plants. But as a bonus feature, it's also a good source of pollen and nectar for butterflies, bees, and other beneficial insects. And as I've alluded to, it seems to be able to survive on water deep in the soil, allowing it to weather short-term droughts. And that particular feature is something that I don't think is really present in almost any other agricultural plant today. So a year ago, the only places we had Silphium growing were Salina, Kansas, and one research farm in Wisconsin operated by Organic Valley, the farmer co-op up there. 1 year later, I can report that our populations are now growing in 2 South American countries, Madison, Wisconsin, 2 stations operated by the University of Minnesota, and a location in Fargo, North Dakota. 1 year ago, I was the only scientist actively working with this species. This year, at least 9 professors, a couple of USDA scientists, 3 graduate students, and 2 postdocs, including Catherine, have been involved with Silphium projects. A year ago, we had never looked into the cells of Silphium. This year, I was able to confirm the size of the nucleus using flow cytometry, and the nucleic acids of several plants are currently being sequenced in Minnesota. A year ago, we'd only looked at plant breeder stuff like seed size and head size, yield per stalk, plant height. But right now, projects are starting up that are designed to map the genes, study the genomic evolution of the genus, find the optimum nutrition, planting date, and field density, learn about the signals needed by seeds to germinate, identify the pollinators and pests of this species, understand the inheritance of fungus resistance, and look at the physiology of water and light use efficiency. Until a year ago, I had always planted my experiments by transplanting seedlings in the spring. In the past year, I successfully drilled seed in the fall and found that many survived the winter, flowered, and produced seed in record time. A year ago, we did not have a good way to mechanically harvest silphium, but just a couple of days ago, we tested out a new system using brand new equipment, at least new to us, and it looks like it's going to work. A year ago, the interns and I spent many, many hours mapping the locations of groups of plants in a field of about 5,000 plants. This year, a graduate student working with a Kansas State University mechanical engineering professor and a wheat genomics professor helped us devise a method to do the same kind of mapping in a much larger field using a self-driving robot with digital cameras. A year ago, I had never seen a plant flower and set seed in the first season. Last December, I discovered that a few plants had indeed set seed. One plant had set a lot of seed. So I wondered, had this plant used the last of its energy to squeeze out those kind of premature seeds? Would it survive the winter? Well, not only did it survive, but it was one of the most vigorous plants in the field this spring and flowered early and then got itself crossed with any other decent plant that I could find. Now, I'm guessing the question that has been forming in your worldly, jaded, cynical minds. If all of this could have happened in 1 year, what the heck has this guy been doing for the previous 17 years? So that's a fair question. And I'll suggest two plausible possibilities. One is that I was just too young to accomplish anything. I was unfocused, naive, irrational. Everyone knows that the plant breeding cortex doesn't fully develop in young males until their mid-40s. The second option is that it was largely due to brilliant fundraising by Wes, Tim, John Schmidt, and Jane, and others, leading to generous new donations, and including the important scientific symposium that's been described, and the unprecedented support for long-term student training and collaborative research. I report, you decide. Thank you.